My name is Tim Carter. This is a lesson for our Cornell University outreach and also our colleagues who work in this university. We collaborate, we exchange dialogue, exchanging information, building on our knowledge. This is an extension of the IamCornell.org Apologetic and Outreach Ministry. Also, this video specifically is in reference to science who rejects 6,000-year-old Earth. And, for example, a Neil deGrasse Tyson was in a discussion with he was refuting 6,000-year-old Earth. And William Lane Craig, a very famous Christian apologist, theologian, unsurpassed in his apologetic ministry. So he's an apologist, a philosopher, a theologian, and he uses hermeneutics. So he's formidable in his defense of the faith and a great resource for people who want to study. This is a response to Neil deGrasse Tyson really wishing people who are fans of his to help feedback for us, because we really want feedback. Now, ridicule, you have the time to waste for that. We don't. But would like to present the divine ratio that was result from a professor of hermeneutics at Missionary Baptist Seminary, Dr. John Penn, who had developed the historical holistic hermeneutic, holistic in that it includes all the Bible. We don't have to toss out the Bible. We don't have to go to outside the Bible sources. For example, some people who say we can take the Bible literally go to extra biblical, like Sumerian King's List, to try to prove lifespans in the Old Testament. However, we have a rationale and believe that it demonstrates that lifespans were truly up to 1,000 years, and that today lifespans are 100 years for a reason. There's a rationale for it. It's called relativity. It's called an accelerated decay rate, exponentially accelerated. We also can demonstrate relativity in the Bible, and that the Bible did not have to originate, that is, the earth did not have to be created, come into existence, but thousands of years ago to have aged in ratio according to this relativity. And feedback would be great, especially from people that actually study physics, chemistry, calculus, things like that, because those are all fields of science that were produced by theology. Those are theological fields called science, and evolution is not scientific. It's just an assertion. Whether you were a believer or an unbeliever, it wouldn't help you when you take your chemistry test. If you're a believer or an unbeliever, you won't be able to leave class after your physics exam and say, well, I'm a believer, I should have done better than the atheist. No, it doesn't work that way. Your denial of evolution doesn't make you smart in physics, or your assertion or embrace of evolution doesn't make you smart in physics. You either do your homework or wish you had. So in calculus, the same thing. You can be a preacher like I was when I took it later in life, and took calculus 1, 2, and 3, and took them twice, each one of them twice, took trigonometry 3 times, college algebra 3 times, just trying to immerse myself into that thinking and rationale that's there. Math is like another language. And I've never taken upper level mathematics, only sophomore level calculus 3. So if I had thought because I was a preacher I would have an advantage, that's not true. So, and if there were unbelievers in my class, they could have done better than I by just the fact that those fields might be produced by theologians, but they're not religious fields in any sense like that, just as they aren't. Evolution's not scientific. It's just simply someone who says, I choose to refuse that this was created by a creator. Okay, but you won't be any smarter at physics or calculus or chemistry. So now that's out of the way, I'll quote first of all a cite from this book recently. It's in PDF format, but a person could order if you want this little flat copy. On page, I think 94, 95. Yeah, divine mutation, genetic entropy, and the divine ratio. Uh, John Sanford, who wrote the book Genetic Entropy, talked about genetic damage results in aging, and aging shortens lifespan. He said this is true for the individual and for the population. The Bible records a limited time when people had extremely long lives, and when in the book of Genesis and in the book of Genesis they seem unbelievable. He goes on and in here, Brother Penn quotes from him. That is, we, the research assistants, under his guided instruction, Eddie Johnson and I collaborated, worked, and helped place all this together. He references a paper by a mathematician and theologian, and he says that the biblical data clearly reveals an exponential decay curve. And of course, the decay rate is a nice way of describing death. Death in the Bible is our bodies decaying, and life in the Bible is not known without our body. The hope of a resurrection, a new body, corresponds with the reality of a decay rate. So Genesis 6, for example, says 120 years. God said, I will not strive with man. My spirit will not always strive. So God had said he would continue to strive for 120 years, and then he would no longer. Some have thought that was a lifespan, and I wouldn't rule that completely out. But later in Psalm 90, that is further into the Bible, Psalm 90 verse 10, it speaks of 70 years and with strength 80 years. So we have 80 years, and others have pointed out that might not have been a specific lifespan. Just seems to be the norm that somewhere around 70 to 80, no one is surprised if someone dies or passes away. That is, their decay rate brings them to termination. Now, if we take the 120 and the 80, average that out, we're looking at exactly 100, which is interesting because 120 and 80 is 200, and you divide it by 2, there's your average. So let's just look at this decay rate that is observed by John Sanford, professor at Cornell University, in his book Genetic Entropy, and look at an observation he made that there is a sophisticated mathematical model in the Bible, and it's strange that they would have collaborated to work all this out. So let's just notice that 100 years is just a fraction of the lifespan of someone before the shift, if we will, and what happened to accelerate that. So let's just move over to the 100 years. So here's 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. Let's say you live to a ripe old 100 years. Well, these people 10 times longer, if we will, and the oldest recorded in the Bible was 969. So he almost got to 1,000, you see. And Adam was told, in the day he eats, he will surely die. The Bible says he lived, so the Bible says he was still alive for 930 years. So he died within the day. By context, the definition would be the 1,000 years. He was barred from re-entry to the garden from which he was outcast. He was still alive. He wanted to live forever, but that was over. He now was finite and would end the day by the Bible's definition. Not there are people that say in the day and they come up with an abstract definition of death, which is strangely ironic that they would insist that day only be 24 hours. I have no idea what that could mean. But then they changed the death that Adam died to something abstract and figurative, and the Bible doesn't know anything about that. So just believing the Bible's trusting that God knows what he's talking about. We'll just leave it at that. But for example, let's go here to Noah. He was around 500 years old when he began to build an ark, and let's say I'm 55 years old. Let's say he was 550. We would have looked just alike. And this rationale demonstrates why someone, for example, let's say an archaeologist, would be doing work in an area where an ancient civilization, but they've only noticed decay rates of around 50 years maybe in some of the evaluations they've made. Well, isn't that exactly what you would have expected? That if we were to be talking with Noah and we were to be watching a man 500 years old, well, for example, when I was 10 years old, I'd already experienced 100 years of decay. But when Noah was 100 years old, he had only experienced 10 years of decay. So although he was fully developed, he was not a decrepit older man here. And then for 4.5 more centuries, had to get his sons to get the walker out to prop him up while he worked on the ark. No, he and I would have looked exactly the same at his 550 years and my 55 years. This is what's so fascinating about relativity. And time, it's taught in the Bible. What's fascinating is science can't reject relativity. Those of us who know any history at all know that it was from the Bible science was produced, and relativity was in the Bible. The invariance of light's in the Bible, ratios in the Bible, relativity a day is 1,000 years. So this is what's fascinating, is that the decay rate is explained from time. But isn't it amazing that a person, an archaeologist working in trying to exhume and determine lifespans of ancient peoples, aren't saying that these people experienced 500 years. They're saying people 500 years old only experienced 50 years. And what's amazing is today, if someone was doing, let's say, an autopsy on me, they would say, they would not say I've experienced 500 years of decay, which they should say that. We should recognize just how severely and how accelerated time is working, because were you to attend my funeral and Noah's funeral, and let's say we both died, he at 550 and I at 55, you couldn't tell which one of us was 55 and which one of us was 550. Now, before you say, oh, that's silly, that's relativity. And that's God's sovereignty. GodandScience.org, I think it is, a website called God and Science, admitted they did not know how this that is lifespans being shortened or reduced, it takes place. And they study now from the viewpoint of genetics and all types of fields of science, which, remember, chemistry, physics, calculus all came from theology. So here we have a rationale, and we can have our days of creation can remain what the Bible says. Evening and morning became the first day. We can remember what Jesus said, that a day is 12 hours. You know there's 12 hours in a day. Speaking of the daylight, we see in the Bible day and night. So when the Bible tells us, Genesis 2:4, for example, in the day that God created heaven and earth, that's singular. So he's referring to those 6 days. That time, that word day is the word time in the original Bible from which that word was translated. So I'm sure there's a lot of people don't like to bother to make the effort to contextualize terms, because if it doesn't suit or fit their mental construct, that they're using the Bible as merely a proof text to support Gnosticism is what that is. That's Gnostics have are predisposed, and I guess all of us are somewhat Gnostic, to consider their own mental constructs their knowledge. They don't consider the canonical scriptures to hold authority. The traditional texts no longer hold authority for them. So if you're unwilling to be scripted by the Bible, then of course continue to pick young, undeveloped expression, or old, another undeveloped expression. Continue to deliberately omit the historical reality that people's lifespans were up to 1,000 years, and continue to ignore that the decay rate is now 10 times in acceleration more than it once was. And you waste your time, but I won't waste mine. And then for Neil deGrasse Tyson, he knows that the Earth did not have to come into existence more than thousands of years ago to have aged in ratio, according to relativity, to 4.5 billion years. And that can be irrefutably demonstrated from the Bible. And when I say irrefutably, meaning that we don't have to go outside the Bible, we don't have to do anything here differently. We know the Bible says that there's a 360-day year. That's literally expressed more than one occasion in the Bible. So there's our 360 days, and that's our year. And here's our missing number. And this would give us 4.5 million days when multiplied by 1,000 years would equal 4.5 billion years. There. And what would that number be? That's only 12,500. If you want to know, well, where would they have gotten the 6,000? Well, if they didn't count night, this drops this to 6,250, which is approximately 6,000 years. So no one denies relativity. If they do, just back away slowly. Don't ride an elevator with them. They probably won't get on it anyway. Don't get in a car with them. They won't probably use cars. You won't bump into them on an airplane. They probably won't be on an airplane. If they reject science, which is a product of theology, science is theological, evolution is not even scientific, then they probably don't really care what the Bible says anyway. They really don't have an interest in knowing that the Bible can be proven, that a person as brilliant as Neil deGrasse Tyson can understand this. He can't refute relativity, wouldn't refute it. He wouldn't even refute that it's in the Bible. He doesn't mean he would believe the Bible or believe the good gospel of the Bible. It's just he needs to know that there are Christians out there who do know better than the ones he has to find himself in contention with, whom he finds himself. For example, William Lane Craig, a brilliant man that he is, he understands this, and he could understand this and would be able to give great feedback, and he would support this. He wouldn't deny an exponential decay rate. He would not deny a mathematical model according to which this can be demonstrated. He would not deny relativity, and he would not deny that it only takes thousands of years for the Earth to have aged in relativity. So people who have less interest in proving the Bible is true and reliable, they just want to support their one little fallible construct that they picked. That's probably more to do with the character problem. Why people would have a problem with solutions is because they have a problem between their ears, not between us. So this is a response to Neil deGrasse Tyson to assure him that people like John Penn, professor of hermeneutics, missionary Baptist seminary, Baptist who labor in word and doctrine. We had an engineer, was one of our professors, Brother John Owen. He taught us that creating something out from nothing was a misunderstanding, because energy was actually transformed into matter, and that's actually demonstrated in the Lorentz transformation. That was taught to us by Brother John Owen. The Hebrew text, probably Brother W.A. Dillard is unsurpassed in his rightly handling and knowledge of Hebrew. He understands instant and spoken creation. He understands how the earth then came to be without form and void. He understands when days are defined is according to context. And he would not find this challenging at all. So for Neil deGrasse Tyson, a famous physicist who has preferred not to believe in God because he just can't take seriously those who don't take God seriously. So enjoy this, and if you're a fan of Neil deGrasse Tyson, this is certainly no ridicule of him. We admire him. We want to communicate effectively to people. But if you want to, if all you can do is ridicule in your feedback, that's okay. Maybe you have time for that. But we really would like feedback on relativity, exponential decay curves, decay rates, and also to appeal to people to realize that we are dying 10 times faster than we once were on this earth. The solar clock is slowing down, time's accelerating. There is a sense of urgency, since we all must deal with decay. And our answer as Christians has always been the resurrection, because it is the absolute solution to a decaying body, a new body, a resurrected body. So for those of us who study and think about it, it's really not that far-fetched. We actually have greater faith and willingness to support the resurrection, the more we understand. And the second death, unfortunately, is just simply no hope of a resurrection. The lake of fire, which is the second death, people who have no hope of a new body will never know what it is to have life as it was originally intended. So you have a blessed day, and please give us feedback as much as you're willing to. Thank you.